you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and white-tailed deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 305. Today, I'm joined by my good buddy, Mike Perry, to talk about learning the public land woods through generations of hunting. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine, and hope everyone out there got a chance to take advantage of this cold front that blew through this past weekend. It came through probably in your neck of the woods at different times or different dates, depending on where you live. But for here in PA, it was blowing through, starting kind of on, I guess, Friday night into Saturday. And then, of course, Saturday was a gorgeous day to be in the deer woods. And then Sunday, which we can't hunt here in PA, which really sucks because it was nice and cold. I think when I got up, it was like 36 degrees, which just feels about perfect to be out in the deer woods. Unfortunately, I did not get to take advantage of it. I had grand plans of headed to the North Piece this past weekend and was ready to rock and roll, but illness had befallen me. Ended up getting sick on like Thursday, and it kind of put me down for the count. Not that I won't hunt through illness, but sometimes depending on whatever type of illness I got going on, I'll have it sometimes accompanied with a bad bout of vertigo. I usually get vertigo like once or twice a year. In a significant kind of way. Usually I'm able to power through it. Usually it's usually just kind of when I wake up and then kind of dizzy, and then it goes away, and then I'm fine as long as I'm upright and doing whatever I got to do. But this was one that just wouldn't let go, just dizziness constantly. And so Friday, whenever I was going to leave to go up to the North Piece, I started feeling kind of crappy at jiu-jitsu on Thursday and had to kind of cut my roll short. And then Friday felt like garbage, and Saturday, and then was supposed to leave Friday night, and I just didn't think that I should be driving, a couple hours, and not sure how I was going to feel the next day, if it was going to get worse or whatever the case was. And good thing I didn't, because it got significantly worse and basically glued my ass to the couch all day Saturday, trying to avoid the barfer, So that's what I had going on, but feeling like I'm getting back into, rounding back into form now, which is good, because I think we're going to have another little bit of a cold front that's maybe not as significant, but maybe even better, because it's getting a little closer to those dates that I really like. This upcoming weekend, it looks like we're going to have a little bit of a temp drop going, I think, from Friday into Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. And then it's going to kind of hold true, or at least, lower temps in terms of the highs all the way through Tuesday. So pretty stoked about that. Certainly going to be out this weekend, and might even look to take a personal day at work or of some sort to try to get a little extra timber time in because it's looking like the weather's going to be choice. Monday's looking a little iffy with some rain, which I like. I just want to make sure it's not going to be a complete soaker like it was, the weekend prior, like 2 weeks ago, I guess, where I basically just got soaked for no good reason. But with that, we're going to go ahead and just kind of jump straight to things. One thing to kind of make mention, though, for everyone listening. So as you guys know, I use the Spartan Forge app. That's the app that I use to kind of do all my mapping and all my tracking and stuff like that. Whenever I'm in the timber, it's got, all the information as far as intel goes in terms of deer predictions, movement predictions, weather predictions, forecasts, like all that stuff that you kind of need to be looking at. It has it all in one place, and they go a step further in terms of predicting deer movement, whether it's a good movement day, abnormal, normal movement day, whether it's transition area, bedding area, or full range. So it has some great intel in it, but previously it was all kind of under a paid kind of model, if you will. And they have an opportunity now for you to actually get the app and download it and actually use a base kind of model for free, which is killer. So you get some killer mapping and just some of the basic features that they have to kind of check the app out before you take the plunge and go for the full kind of paid premium version. And even at that, it's way less expensive than pretty much any other map app out on the market. So go ahead and check that out. You can either go to spartanforge.ai and check that out at their website. There'll be some links there to get to where you can download it, or you can just go to wherever you download your iOS or your Android device apps. Head there and just search Spartan Forge, and it should come up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Have a cool show for you guys today. Have my good buddy, Michael Perry on. So there's two friends I have named Mike Perry. One is from kind of Western PA and one is from the South. I am talking to the Southern Mike Perry today. We had him on not too long ago. I want to say it was maybe a year ago. And I mean, he killed just an absolute stud last year of a whitetail in Alabama. And that's kind of how I ended up meeting him. And this most recent conversation, I just wanted to get Mike back on, but it also just kind of married up nicely with he actually put a book out, and he sent me an initial copy of the book. He wrote something nice in the front of it, which is appreciated. Mike's a good dude. And wanted to have him on just to kind of talk about his book, give him an opportunity to kind of share, what's in the book, and hopefully some of you guys want to check it out. I would definitely check it out. It's a good read. What I really kind of like about it is a lot of times you get these books that are kind of steeped in tactics and stuff like that, and he certainly has a lot of that in there. But it's built around different hunts either he, his brother, or his family have done, that they learned these lessons on public lands that they've adopted over the years. So the cool thing is that he and his family, all the way back to his dad, maybe even his grandfather, I forget exactly, but I want to say it's 50 years worth of hunting the public land that he and his family have hunted in and around the area that he lives. And so he's intimately knowledgeable of it, and that's really kind of how he cut his public land teeth. He didn't have... he loves podcasts and stuff like that, but he didn't have these types of things whenever he was figuring this stuff out. It was a lot of just getting on deer, watching, mature deer for the area, do things, and then, just having to remember that stuff and put it in his notebook and journal and go back to it, a year later. And those were how he learned his lessons. And so he kind of talks, that's really what the book is about, is, almost like an evolution of, how he learned a lot of these lessons that, he's talked about on this podcast and others, that has shaped how he's hunted. And hopefully it's helping shape some other folks out there, how they hunt. Cause, Michael certainly knows how to get it done. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today you'll recognize the voice on the other end of this conversation because I have, he's a two-time offender now officially. I have on Mr. Michael Perry from Alabama. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. How's it feel to be a two-time offender? I mean, there's no jail time or anything that comes with this. It's just a badge of honor is all it is.
Well, I feel pretty good about that, but I was kind of worried about if I recognize my voice. I was was I talk that bad Southern or what?
Right. I didn't think of it that way. It's it might be the most Southern fella I've had on the show. No, okay. No, I've had a couple other Southern folks on. Actually, I had a guy on. I'm pretty sure Alabama. Jonathan Moreland. I think he was from Alabama, if I'm not mistaken.
Moreland?
Yeah,
No, he's from Arkansas.
Arkansas. That's right. I knew it was an A. He's gonna hate me
Yeah.
for saying. He's gonna hate me for saying that too. I know how you Southern fellas are about your where you're from, your states. You know.
Yeah,
So
he's a Razorback. So he's an enemy, but no, I'm just kidding. But he's a killer with a recurve, primitive weapon stuff.
yeah, he is.
I watched some of his stuff and follow him. But yeah, he's a very neat guy. But yeah, he's an enemy. He's a Razorback. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
stuff.
I like all you Southern guys, man. I was I might have been born in the North. I was actually I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, believe it or not. So I was born in the South, but my whole family's from PA. So my dad was in the military, and then shortly after I was born, we moved back. So I don't know that I got enough time there for you guys to claim me, and that's okay. I'll live vicarious. I got a little Southern fire in me though, a little passion, because you guys are passionate, and that maybe that's the part of the Southern I got. How about that?
Well, if he was born there and you're carried it to the North, trying to help him out a little bit, that's fine. We have no problem with that.
Trying to give him a hand, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how you been, man? What's new and going on with you?
I've been great. I've been busy. Of course, y'all know I work 12-hour swing shifts, and we're trying to recover from the COVID stuff, getting our plant back to full operation. So I've been busy working and then trying to get some stuff ready for deer hunting. Our season kicks off this Saturday in some special areas. So, and the area that I like to hunt, I'll start out with. I'll start off Saturday. So
nice.
We're looking forward to it. I'm ready, but I'm not ready, of course, like most folks. You're ready to hunt, but you're not got everything all detailed out yet. So I'm working on that. So.
That's just it, man. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But speaking of being busy, the last time we talked was, I don't know, it was several months ago. It might actually be coming up on a year. I don't remember the last time that you were on the podcast, the specific date. But since then, man, you wrote and recently published a book. So you've been a little bit more than busy with work. What made you want to write a book? Where did that come from?
Well, I've been working on that since February, but the history of me a little bit. So I started writing some articles for Alabama Outdoor News magazine. So like 14 years ago or so, they asked me, and I'd send in some stuff just to trying to get a feeler for them because I was kind of interested in it a little bit. So I've done that for a while and enjoyed that. It was kind of tough with the way it works. And then after I killed a couple of good deer, I've had some people ask me about it, because, I like sharing and promoting public land and stuff like that. So I was thinking about it, but whenever I killed the state record muzzleloader deer, I kind of felt, well, maybe I got enough street credit or whatever where I could actually feel good about writing a book and maybe it wouldn't be, any negative talk about, well, he don't know what he's talking about or whatever. So I kind of feel like maybe I deserve a little bit of credit where I could write one. So I thought I would try it. So I got with a guy named John E. Phillips that's wrote a bunch of books and stuff like that, and he helped me out with the writing part of it. Like I say, we started in February. Then I had got another guy to do the layout where we could upload it up to do the Amazon Kindle stuff. So I worked on that. So it took a while. We worked hard at it, and then it was it was pretty neat. It's a process, a lot harder process than kind of what I thought, but it was fun. It's worth it. I like promoting public land, and I wanted to do that because part of it is like we only in Alabama, Pennsylvania, y'all are one of the better states about hunting numbers. Our population now only 4%, maybe less than 4% by hunting license.
Wow.
So and we don't have as much. I think we don't have 1 million acres. We're pushing 700,000 acres or something like that of public land. That's huntable. It's not a real big number. We've lost some over the years, so it's trying to promote that and try to get a little fire on that too. And I'm assuming you've got a copy, and the picture of it shows a sign. So
yeah. No, I appreciate you sending me a copy for everyone out there listening. It's called "Secrets to Taking Mature Bucks on Public Lands." So be sure to check that out. But what I really liked that's an interesting take. Like the fact that you wanted to promote it, because a lot of people would would not want to, right? Like if you have some places that are really good, you kind of keep them close to the vest.
Right. And I've caught a lot of crap over it because those people hate that I put that picture with that sign that behind that deer. But I've never been shy about it. I've always promoted when I kill something with the technology, the promotional part of it, Facebook and all that stuff. I've always posted on there, and there's people give me crap for it. I've had people follow me and whatever, but it's not really hurt me yet because there's ways to get around things like that. But because of the low numbers of hunters, if you don't promote it and we're not using it or whatever, it might go away. We've lost enough land, so I'm not scared to promote it, and I'm going to promote it. And I think we need to promote it because it's ours. It's our public land, so we need to use it. So
Yeah.
I don't
No.
want to shy away from and I'm not worried about people getting my spots. If they do, that's more power to them. So
Right. No, I mean, it's kind of refreshing to hear. I'm not going to say kind of. It is refreshing to hear, someone who's had the level of success that you've had, because it goes back years. It's not just that most recent deer that you've killed. I mean, you've got just walls of them. You know what I mean? Of good bucks, mature bucks that you've killed, and that your focus is less on when's the next what's the next big buck I'm going to kill, and I know you want to kill good mature deer, but that your focus really is how do I get more people to enjoy this, because you recognize that the only way this stuff sticks around is if there's enough people that are willing to make noise about it. And if there isn't, if they want to take something from you, well, if you don't have enough weight to anchor the tug of war line, you end up losing that tug of war.
Yeah, just like me bringing up that 4%, 4% buy a hunting license or less. We'll see. Over the last couple of years, we've lost a few things. Like one of them was spear hunting. Used to, you could spear hunt in Alabama, and there was a guy that was allowed that promoted it. Took him a while to get it passed, and then after he died, and they just kind of slid that under the radar and took it out. So you can't do that. You can't spear hunt anymore. So now you probably won't never be able to get that back. And there's some people mad about it because if you start taking away a little bit at a time, when you let people do it, then they're just going to get more. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's an issue. And like I say, if you only got 4% buying hunting license, who's gonna fight for you? So
Yeah, that's just it, man. It's and that goes with almost anything. You know what I mean? It's like it takes just enough to where you don't notice it, or maybe you don't throw a fit about it. But the reality is the thing that they're willing to take from you today isn't the end game. That's not the only thing they're willing to take. There's a plan.
yeah,
There's an end game for them, and that's just a pawn. A lot of times, just to check the temperature. How much of a fit are you going to throw? Maybe I'll go bigger next time. That's a lot of time what happens. I think Pennsylvania, we have good hunter numbers. And even still, I think we still struggle at times to push things through that are important to us. And it's I'll give you an example. Sunday hunting, for example. Like we can't hunt Sundays. We've gotten a handful of Sundays the past couple years, including this year. I think this year's the last year that it was passed. So legally, it would have to be renewed, or they would have to renegotiate that. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the last year of that deal. And really, it was a test, right? Because it's part of blue laws that were around during who knows when. Whenever they banned liquor and all kinds of stuff. Couldn't sell cars on Sunday for a long time either. That was another one.
That's kind of like the southern thing. We that's kind of wild. I remember now hearing y'all talk about that, but see, we've in the South that used to be a big thing. No Sunday hunting, blue law, and all that stuff. But we're kind of getting away from that. There's a place or two that still don't have like some federal land that you can't hunt on Sundays, but now you can buy liquor on Sundays and places. Well, we still have some counties that are dry. You can't buy any liquor in certain counties or stuff. But
right.
That's a unique thing. So I didn't realize it was that prevalent in the north. So.
Oh yeah. We can't hunt Sundays here. We've gotten a handful of them, and I'll get the dates and stuff wrong here, but we get one of them, like maybe in archery, like I think it's the last Sunday of regular archery season you can hunt. So it's usually around like November 14th.
Oh.
I think there's a day in there for maybe bear. There's a Sunday for deer rifle season, and there's another Sunday somewhere. I forget exactly what the date is. But we get a handful of them. And the challenge here is that you would think hunters would want to hunt, right? But you even here get hunters who don't want Sunday hunting for whatever reason. I'm not here to tell someone that they're right, wrong, or whatever the case is. And a lot of times it's rooted in tradition, not wanting to change it just for the sake of it. That's the way it's always been. So, and I'm not smart enough to say one way or the other what the economic impact is or isn't, or whatever the case is. I look at it through this lens. I like to hunt. The more opportunity I have to hunt, the better. That's kind of the way I look at it. So I do like Sunday hunting, but that's one of the things there where even though we have good hunter numbers, we still struggle to push that stuff through because we can't get all on the same page,
Yeah, it's tough on the people that weekend hunters just having one day basically to hunt. So it's
Yeah.
so I'm all about like church and stuff is fine if you want to do that and that's your choice. And I'm a believer in stuff, so there's no issue with that. But after church or whatever, I believe you should have the opportunity. So you
Yeah.
know,
Totally agree with you, man. But I want to jump back to the book here real quick because I'm always curious when people take an endeavor. So I'll take use me as an example. When I started the podcast, you know, I thought about things about deer hunting and doing the podcast that I had in a million years would have never thought of or come across or remembered or whatever the case is. So was there anything as you were writing the book that caught you by surprise or something that you remembered that that maybe you had forgotten or just not thought about in a long time that you were like, oh man, yeah, that's right, I should think about whatever? Was there something like that happened during the course of writing this?
well, several times on some of the details, and the biggest thing that helped me is that I keep everything wrote down in the journals from all the way back to the '80s. So I would be reading through the journal and looking at this stuff, and wow, that is right. So one in particular is I've had people bring this up to me several times that I actually was hunting thermal hubs before people even talked about it because it's a story about crooked-foot, how I hunted that crooked-foot deer in
Mm-hmm.
one of the chapters. So things like that is when you get to looking at it and thinking about, well, that is true. I didn't even really realize that. So there's some unique points in there and stuff like that with it. And also my being with my dad in there because he's passed away is reliving some of them specific moments, doubling up or whatever with him. So it's all that is very unique and kind of heart pulling your heartstrings some while you're doing that. So, but it's well worth it. And, like I said, it took a while, but and so far I'm proud of it and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think talking about the family aspect of it, I know we were talking right before we started recording, we started talking about it a little bit, but that was the thing that, you know, that kind of caught me. And just in full transparency, the people out there that are listening, it's like I've been able to read about 50 pages of the book before we had a chance to chat. And then I skimmed a bunch of it to kind of get ready to have the conversation. But the family aspect of it was one of the things that I thought was really cool because I knew that you'd been hunting public land for a lot of years, from the last time you and I spoke. But like reading through the book, realizing that it wasn't just you, it was actually you and your family have been hunting public lands in this general area for like 50 some odd years, which is
uh,
crazy to kind of think about. It's you, it's your dad, it's your brother, it's like the whole crew. It's like, and you've kind of came of age on these pieces of public land, right?
right, because back when we first started doing that, the deer were just starting to get a decent population, recovering from the Great Depression and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of stuff has changed since then. I mean, we basically grew up as growing up with a deer, basically, having to look for days to find a track on some of these places and stuff like that, or even find a deer to hunt. So it was a unique experience, and it's a lot of people don't realize. And if you go back in time on a lot of states, that there wasn't hardly any deer or any deer that they got wiped out during the depression and stuff. So we've grown a long way and come a long way from Roosevelt doing some stuff, and then from some other protective laws since then to help get these numbers back. Now we got you got deer living in people's yards and stuff now where you never even seen a track. So
Right.
I remember like my grandpa and them talking. They had 40 acres, and if it left the track one day, it was probably supper the next day. And back then, but we've grown a lot and went through a lot of change, and it's better now. We just got to figure out a way to promote and protect it. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting that people, take for granted, you know, um, maybe some of the hunting opportunities they have. Just thinking about, there was a time when deer weren't prevalent, especially in certain areas where it was, like the situation you're talking about, where they actually had to bring in, deer from different areas of the country to kind of reintroduce populations, and
uh,
turkeys weren't always as prevalent as they are, and they were almost, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were almost extinct at one point.
yeah,
The numbers were so low,
right.
you know.
There's a lot of things through conservation dollars, actual hunters dollars that brought stuff back and have got them back in good population. In some places, better population than they was ever. So
hmm So when you were young growing up, what like what was the likelihood of running across a decent deer, and what would you maybe call a decent deer back then?
Um, and the way we was raised and what we did, my father and them and his buddies, they started out, and I kind of give a little history. They started out duck hunting. Well, duck hunting didn't do too good in Alabama. They tried that for a while, and then they went to rabbit hunting. They done all right. Then somehow somebody come up with deer hunting. So they started deer hunting on public land, and most of them was toting shotguns. And they went through all the changes from shotguns to, I think a Remington 742 was popular first, like a semi-automatic. You could sling more bullets trying to kill something. Then the boats action started taking over. But they were all just deer hunting. They chased muzzleloader hunt because that was the only hunt that you could actually shoot any deer. But if you seen like the first deer buck I killed was a spike, and when I seen it coming through the woods, it was like seeing a ghost or like seeing the devil or something like that because you heard about it but you never seen it. And I seen the
Right.
antlers. I just seen the antlers shining. And I started shaking. I tried to figure out how I was going to get up and shoot it. And no, you can't get up. You got to sit down and get props. And I climbed up with a homemade stand where you hug the tree and pull it up, and I had to pull a bucket up and sit on it and stuff like that. And then when I did shoot it, and luckily I hit it and killed it, it was just got down there and I was, tearing and just happy, hooping, hollering, and whatever, crying. And it was a spike with about 5 or 6 inch spikes, and that was like killing a 12 pointer, or a 200 inch deer or whatever to me, because that's what you heard about. If you see an antler, you shoot it because you're not going to see them. It's just they're rare. A buck is a buck. It wasn't. There was no such thing as as 10 points or 8 points. It was a buck. That's what you were after, a buck. We didn't really worry about counting points or anything. So
Right.
it was an amazing time, but it's completely changed now. But it was so exciting, that part of it, because we didn't know anything about trophy hunting until later on. So
Right. So when did you start kind of making that pivot then? To from, I'm just hunting a buck, or for a buck just in general,
right.
to, I have I don't want to say a standard, but you're now looking for a mature deer. Like when did that evolution start happening for you?
That was the biggest switch was when my brother killed that 18 point, in which I was already, you know, which I didn't kill my first good buck till I was 31.
I was
So
just
we
gonna say
just,
because I think I remember reading in the book that was like your first Pope and Young buck was 31, right?
he wasn't Pope Young, but he might have, well, no, he wasn't made Pope Young as far as, but he was 110, 15 inches. He was a
Okay.
mature deer. It was,
Yep.
but he was the first good one. It was a 9 point. So it was actually that crooked toe buck. But, so Alabama, Pope and Young buck back in them days that's a big buck now in Alabama, 125-inch deer. But anyway, I was 31, and we just, like I say, you were a buck hunting because that was, if you to kill something for food or whatever, it had to be a buck, it had to be horns, unless you was muzzleloader hunting, and they didn't have, at that time, they didn't have that many of them. So to be able to harvest something, it had to be a buck. There wasn't no doe hunts or anything until later.
Right,
So
because I remember I remember you wrote about that because there was a point in time where it's like if you killed a doe, where you were at, it was like, I mean,
that was
you got the stink eye, right?
uh, yeah, that was a sin for a long time because that's how you had more deer is does. So you didn't kill them, so you wanted more does to produce more bucks.
Hmm.
You wasn't worried about trophy managing or anything like that. You were worried about doe managing or deer managing. So, but later on, Texas was probably in the forefront of buck management and stuff like that. So later on, that started picking up a little bit. And they done a few surveys, and then, but when my brother killed that 18 point, it was like, holy, that was a whole different level. So I started changing my mindset a little bit, and it took a little while to figure out. And when I killed that crooked foot deer, the way everything happened with that and how way he acted and everything was like, I got to change, some stuff up because it took forever for me to kill him, but I'm watching him the whole time because the way he acted, the way he used the woods and the shadows and stuff like that, the wind, and I mean, I'm not, it wasn't a deer. He was totally different. So I had to change the mindset. And that after my brother killed an 18 point, it took me a while. Then when I finally killed Crooked Foot and some more of them, I started figuring out that to quit hunting, all that pretty good looking sign and stuff like that, hunting the places where more rugged, where a big buck was liable to be hiding, and using that versus hunting a bunch of doe sign and young buck sign and stuff like that. I
Right.
wouldn't worry about quit looking for deer and start looking for mature bucks. I would, if I went a week without seeing a deer, then I knew I was in the right place because if you're seeing doe and stuff all the time, most of the time, unless it's a rut, you're in the wrong place.
Man, that is like uh, that is one of the hardest things I think, for people to kind of comprehend and overcome, is that, you know, and even I struggle with it because, a lot of my hunts, I won't see a deer, and it starts to weigh on you mentally because you're like, dang, am I even in the right spot? Like, do I even know what I'm doing? Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? You start to question yourself a little bit, but I can't tell you, like, ever since the point, in my hunting journey when I stopped focusing on seeing deer and just hunted in areas where I was like, man, this is an out of the way spot. Like, the people aren't in here. I see a little bit of sign, but like not a ton. That was whenever I started having my best encounters. Now,
Right.
there wasn't a lot of them, but that's where I would end up having the encounters that I wanted to have. But the
Right.
interesting thing is that you kind of picked that up intuitively. Like, you started seeing that and piecing stuff together. It's like I had the advantage of, you know, reading magazines or listening to podcasts or whatever. So how did you kind of come to that? Like, well, you're in a stand, and I guess it's hunting Crooked-foot, and he was just acting differently.
Right.
Like,
We seen one thing about him. We had a little history because we would see his track, and he had survived EHD and had a crooked front foot, a wrinkled up foot because he made it through EHD, and he would leave that track like on creek crossing or a scrape or something every now and then. So that kind of like, putting it personal then. So and but it just I completely had to change my mindset because like I say, we didn't have magazines. If you had a magazine, it was Outdoor Life, and it didn't have anything to do with Alabama. I can tell you that because it was all Midwest stuff.
right.
So,
Yeah.
but you just had to learn that, like, even so, we y'all or people that hunt a lot of food plots and stuff like that, it's very rare that you would see a mature buck come out the same place or wherever their nose at. He's always going to come out somewhere different. Or if he did come out, he might just stick his nose out or just circle downwind, whatever. He didn't follow their nose out there unless there's one in heat, and that was just a minimum amount of time. And another thing that helped me out is the trail camera part later on is once I started figuring out what I wanted to do, trail cams helped me kind of confirm what I was trying to do. Is because a trail cam, like right now, I'll give it this year for instance. I bought 3 cell cams last year, and I've had them out since last year. And this year, up until last night, I've only had one buck that showed up on a cell cam. So now I've had like 2 or 3 because a mature buck, they're not like other deer. They don't advertise that they're here, most of the time. So
Mhm.
you can get if you're expecting to get them on camera all the time, especially down here where I hunt the big woods, stuff like that ain't gonna happen because they can lay up in the green patch somewhere and then just browse a little bit and then get up at night and then do whatever it is and then be laid back down, stay there all day. So it's just they're a different animal. You got to think different, and then if you're hunting to see deer, and then another thing is you got to make yourself a goal. Like our goal is 3.5 and older is what we're trying to shoot for. A good something that's got 4 on one side and it's at least wide as its ears, and it don't have to be a monster buck, but it's just you got to make goals and kind of stick with it and try to be true to yourself and just stick with your goals. If you're not seeing anything, don't settle, for something because I've got plenty of stories about like I've told a story before, like one time I was bow hunting. It was November, hadn't seen anything much, hadn't shot anything, had a 3-point come out, and I whacked it with the bow. And then 15 minutes later, I'm sitting there watching a 6-point come up and 2 bigger bucks, and one of them was real big, sparring out there. Here I am, done shot a 3-point, and I can't do anything about it. So that's, if I'd have held true to what I wanted to do, then I would have had an opportunity. So you've got to be able to make that switch and trust yourself. So
Yeah.
stick with it.
Yeah. Speaking of trusting yourself, it's a good segue because we were talking a little bit at the beginning before we started recording just about, you know, you do all, like I think you said when we first started recording, like the season's getting ready to start, but you ain't always ready to get started. It's
Right.
like I always feel like you're behind, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people, because this will come out in a couple weeks, but it'll still be kind of the beginning part of the season. Like, people roll into the season and they'll have, their best laid plans for the season. They did all their postseason scouting. I'm in this boat, did all the postseason scouting, and
Mhm.
and then you get to the beginning part of your season, and for whatever reason, whether it's Mother Nature just didn't cooperate with you with, an acorn crop for the year, or maybe there's just all of a sudden a bunch of pressure blows into the area that you thought had that was secluded, that's 2 miles back. All of a sudden you've got people who are walking through there that you figured out. But for whatever the case, whatever the reason is, your plan kind of blows up immediately. What
Right.
what would you do, or what do you do if you kind of make a plan for the year, for the season, and from the moment the season started, like the first week, the first hunt, or the first weekend, or whatever the case is, it completely goes sideways. What do you do to try to get things back on track?
I'll say right now, like this year, we're having a lot of talk with people because our season, like I say, starts Saturday in some places. So right now, everybody's looking for acorns, and there's very few to be found. So that blows up a lot of people's early season, strategy because acorns is very minimum. Where last year you could walk 5 foot and get 10 gallons.
Hmm.
But that was worst case scenario because you couldn't pick out a tree to hunt. So
Yeah.
now you're doing your little, like we do a bunch of postseason scouting. Most of my plans are made postseason scout. So I look for new areas and then make sure I learn, keep it up with my areas my real good areas. Keeping everything observed during the postseason, make sure ain't been any slight changes or anything like that. But now, see, I'm doing spot checks for acorns for my early season stuff, and that right now is that they're not there. So that's one good thing about postseason scouting is you try to learn all your food sources, all your thinning areas, your cutovers, places that have been thinned where the stuff is growing back after controlled burns and stuff like that we have down here. So you just got to be aware of all your food sources and then slightly adjust. But if you can find a tree that's popping when there's not any acorns hardly, you're in the game much, or you can go to persimmons.
Mhm.
There's and food plots, if they do them, I'm not a big food plot hunter, but early season when they plant them in the rain, hits right them sprouts. Deer love hitting them new sprouts and stuff like that. A mature buck might be a little bit tougher, but if there's no acorns or anything and they're out doing their patrol, because one thing that's kind of unique about Alabama is, and it's not most of your states up north might not be a little different, is we can hunt rut from November, first week of November all the way to February in
Yeah.
different parts of the state. So we only have to worry about the early season stuff for a few weeks, where I'm hunting at. So after that, you start changing up for your pre-rut and stuff. But cameras, like I do everything like a year ahead with my camera stuff. I find new places or places that I'm suspecting to be good and put cameras out, and I'll check them, saying, or I'll put some out in August, or I'll check them in August or July and change the batteries out. Then I won't check them again until after season. I kind of see what's happening during that, during the rut and stuff, and certain pinch points and funnels, travels, edges like that. So I'm looking for a different area for the next season. So that's how I do a lot of my plans and have backup plans. So,
Yeah, and I want to get to your trail camera strategy here in a second because it is a little bit different than kind of how I do things, and I was reading about it in the book, and I thought it was kind of interesting. But before we jump to that, you were talking about doing kind of all your scouting and a year in advance, really. Like that's kind of how you kind of plan things, and
uh,
you'll go out and kind of pre-scout like your spots where you think you might have some acorns dropping or whatever, and in postseason that's when you're learning like all the different food that might be around, so how you might have to change.
and
But
I don't want my deer to feel pressured any. So I try to do everything I can after the season to get all that intel and know where all my food sources in. Then one preseason or early season, just do a spot check on the wild oaks that you're aware of because you got them all documented, red oaks or whatever.
mhm,
Check your food sources, do minimum intrusion because, like I said, I don't want any. Now I've got where I want him doe hunt period until later, unless because I want the does to feel safe. I don't want any pressure at all that's applied by me. So I'm
yeah,
trying to make it better odds for me. So minimum intrusion. So
yeah, because that's kind of the spot that I'm in now. Like the past, my season's been in at this point. While when we're recording this, has been in about 2 weeks, and we're going into week number 3, and
wow,
and uh, and so I've hunted 2 days. I've hunted 3 hunts, and really they were more observation hunts where I was going into maybe some new areas I haven't hunted before. Well, one of them
uh,
both of them were actually brand new areas I've never hunted before that I kind of found this past off season. Hung some cameras, and it was really to kind of go and check cameras and some white oaks that I had found, and during postseason to see if they were dropping, and not a single one of them was dropping anywhere. So that's kind of blew my early season plan up. So now I'm kind of, back to kind of what you're talking about, where I started making my contingency plan of knowing where, some cuts are and stuff like that, where I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to go hunt the edges of these because
mm,
that's where the food's going to be.
uh,
And of course, cover and so forth. But, you know,
uh,
I wanted to,
and that's the one thing to kind of point out. I don't know how y'all think about it up there, but like a lot of people down here get to thinking that acorns is a actual food source they got, but they don't have to have them.
No.
They're browsing on hundreds of different things. They just use them for like candy
Hmm.
or whatever, or fast food or something like that, because they just don't go to the tree and just sit there all night and eat all of them. They browse around. There's certain trees they like, but they just don't keep moving. So you don't have to. You kind of change your mindset on that just a little bit, because they don't have to have them to survive. Cuts is more important, or cutovers, whatever the terminology is for it.
Hmm.
Or thinned areas. Browse stuff is.
Right. So how do you? So that's a good point, and I know you've mentioned this. Uh, I'm pretty sure you mentioned this in the book. Is a feed tree, right? And so I talked a little bit when I had Jonathan on. We talked a little bit about a feed tree, and so knowing that obviously deer browse animals, they don't just sit down somewhere and gorge themselves. They kind of eat as they're kind of moving through.
Uh,
How do browse trees kind of play into your overall hunting strategy, knowing that acorns aren't like the end all be all for you necessarily?
well, if I prefer, like this year, I prefer a year with not as many acorns, because they're going to actually move them more.
Hmm.
They're going to actually move more to look for stuff like that, because there'll be some tree somewhere that's dropping, so they're going to travel around looking, checking, because they don't have a complete survey of, they don't have other deer tell them there's no acorns anywhere. They're going to still get out, and then when it
Right.
comes to it, they're going to travel around more, especially when it gets colder, because they get their keep their body heat up. They're going to have to travel more to browse more, and they're going to kind of leave some areas like yarding areas or wintertime, cold weather areas. Most of that's are deep cuts and stuff. I like it better when there's not as many acorns, so they will travel more. But most of the time, like early season, I look for a feed tree and stuff like that with some buck sign. I'm looking for big tracks and big droppings. Then on my evening hunts, I'm preferring hunting where I suspected bedding on upper elevation stuff, catching them coming down when they're going down there, looking for their bottom trees in the bottoms that might be dropping, or doing their scrape running and stuff like that. So I don't really worry about feed trees as much as a lot of people do. I know some people do. Me, I don't. So.
Hmm. So I was reading a little bit about just kind of how your um, about your scouting approach, and you talked about a couple different things that I want to kind of touch on, and get an explanation or just kind of dive into it. But you talked about the spot within the spot, and and I've kind of talked about this with different guys, and everyone kind of has a different approach to this. So when you identify that that spot within a spot, what are you specifically looking for that tells you you know that you're at, not just like you didn't just find a good area, but you found the killing spot? What does that look like for you?
I guess you probably know, and a lot of people that keep up with me, is most of my stuff I start out by walking drainages, creeks, and stuff like that, and I try to find a creek crossing or a big track somewhere. Then once I find a big track or big droppings, I will look at the maps and then look at on foot, look at the areas and try to find what I think he's doing, where he's going, and why he's doing it. So our deer down here is in the main place I start out with is a lower deer density, so they travel more. Your doe groups are more spread out, so the bucks will actually travel more than the pre-rut and stuff. So I'm looking for a creek crossing with a big buck track. Most of the time you don't hardly even see them crossing, because your does will cross in one place and your bucks are always going to cross downwind somewhere. They're never hardly ever going to cross the same place unless they're just hot on one's tail. So
Mm.
once I find that creek crossing, well, then I'm looking for something else. I'm looking, well, why did he cross there? So where was he going? So I'm looking for the next thing up, which could be, say, a shelf or some kind of bluff gap, a funnel. I mean, habitat changes, different, say, cedar thickets, pine edges, something that's going to make them go a certain way, or blow down areas on tops, or points that, like when it's cold, the sun hits first and stuff like that. Just one reason why they would be there and why would they be going there at a certain time. And so I'm trying to find as many of them as I can, and then later on, I'm putting the cameras on them above them, because of where the hill country is where a lot of our stuff is at. And I like hunting something that's got to do with some kind of terrain changes and stuff like that. So I'm putting cameras above and close to them edges and stuff like that, and then trying to. And I'm always going to put a camera somewhere where I think, well, I would hunt right here if everything plays out and it's what I think it is. So I'll put the camera in that spot and see what I get.
Mm.
And a lot of times it could be associated with like a thermal hub, more points going to coming to that spot. You can look at a map and start drawing lines from point to point, point to point, just from, I'll say, from 5 miles out on the map, and trying to see where all that intersects and what kind of food sources you have around that, and how a deer would travel to get to them places. So
Hmm.
it's all a bunch of different strategies to try to figure all that out. But most of it is boots on the ground. Maps can give you some things, but not everything, because there's always maps are not always perfect, especially with the hilly country and the steeper stuff about finding little shelves and little small what we call bluff gaps. I don't know how much that stuff y'all have up there, but it's somewhere where a deer can make an elevation change. On a bluff area or a rough area, they make that transition.
Hmm.
Be like us driving down the interstate and try to get to the other side of the interstate. You got a certain place you got to do that with. And mountainous areas and bluff areas, they got certain places that they do that, and bucks use certain areas versus where does would use, just to transition to a different ridge system. So.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like I think I found, as you're kind of talking about it, I'm envisioning a spot that I found scouting this winter, which I actually found a bed there too.
Mhm.
I actually had some intel in that general area from some trail cameras, a couple bucks, and they were always coming from this one particular. Actually, there's two spots that I did that kind of come to mind, and I found a bed in both spots, and it was really steep country, and there was just really kind of like one spot where you could get up and down, you know,
Right.
and kind of move from like there was a bench essentially. It was kind of wrapping around this mountain, and off that bench, it was really just kind of one spot where you could go up and get up to the top, and it actually shelved out into like almost like a rock like crop like outface or whatever.
Mm.
And if you just kind of there's not like a trail or anything like that, but if you walk up there, all of a sudden as soon as you get up there, like boom, there's a bed right there on that
Right.
lip. And that made me think of that. And there was a second one that was kind of similar to that, where there was like a big drop off and a big elevation change that Buck was using, and it was interesting because like I had trail camera data that was always kind of coming from that area at a certain time. It was
Mhm.
different bucks using the bed, but they were always coming from the same direction. So this offseason, I went and
Right.
scouted that area, and sure enough, I went about 150 yards from my camera. There was a bed right there,
Right.
using the same type of terrain change. But you mentioned a couple minutes ago, how you would set up like on an evening, in a specific area. And I think one thing that folks, get wrong, or maybe they mess up, or maybe they just forget about it and make a mistake, or whatever the case is just knowing if a setup that they have is a morning or an evening, particular setup. So,
Mm.
how are you determining whether or not something's going to work for you in the morning versus, maybe better in the evening?
Most of that is old school. When I was raised up, you always hunted in the mornings and then high and the evenings low, and it was because the old folks didn't call it thermals. They just called it the way the wind drifts or whatever. So in the mornings, I'm always going to be higher, because, and it's not specific because of thermals, mainly because down here the wind is not predictable. So if you're going to bottom, sure deer use bottoms, but if you're down there, the wind will be ricochet or swirl. It's never consistent. So you're risking too much to stay down there in the bottoms unless you got a constant wind, and it's got to be a big enough or wide enough area in the bottom to keep it constant. If it's not, if you got multiple points and stuff like that, which is your preferred places because you want more points and stuff coming together for thermal hubs
Hmm.
to actually be more successful or have better odds. So I've learned. It took me a while to figure that out. And there's a story about Kathy hunting one where she got busted, but she killed a deer because the wind is too unpredictable in the mornings in the places I hunt. So I stay higher above it, and be set up with a thermal that's not going to affect me. They're going to come off the backside of where I'm set up, or they're going to come straight down in front of me, and if I'm hunting in the rut and stuff like that, which most of that's going to be, that when the deer get to that point, there should be shot, 'cause most of them is gun hunts.
Right.
Bow hunting, I'll have to watch it and pay attention to how it is, and maybe drop down a little bit, hunt below where the thermals is going down for the while. So, but evenings, I'm always going to be in the bottoms, because the bucks, to me, and most of my early season success for what bucks I've killed has been in the evenings, bow hunting, where they're coming down off of a secondary point or something when they come down to go to water, or they're going to make their little jaunts and stuff like that. So my postseason scouting, or even some pre early season or preseason scouting, I find a track that's coming down, crossing something like that. And I'll try them for a hunt or two in the evenings, and then I'll move on to a different one because most of the time you get about two shots on them, and they figure out you're there or something. So I keep multiple spots like that, in my mind to try. But all my evening hunts because I want them to be below it when the thermals are dropping down. I catch them; they're coming down, so it's easier to get within bow range. And I'm always tight to them areas. So
Okay. Yeah, I usually kind of play it, very similar. I think it becomes really, I don't want to say obvious, but you see it a lot more like when you're elk hunting because of the severity of the elevation changes out there and
uh,
severity of the elevation changes out there. And it's like elk hunters live and die by thermals. It's like if you go and you elk hunt and you can't play the thermals, it's like you likely never see one.
uh,
Because they're just that's you're constantly kind of battling them, and they're really strong, out there because of the elevation and
uh,
so forth. But uh, so
And a lot of that stuff you've got to learn by the experience, actually being there and doing it with the milkweed or whatever you're
yeah,
using. I don't get me wrong. There's places that I hunt, bottoms in the mornings, but it's places where I have a consistent wind or the area is big enough where I can get there and not have to worry about that type of thermal. So the farther south you go or you get away from more of the hill country, there's easier ways to hunt bottoms. Swamps. I love a lot of swamp hunting and stuff like that. So you got to play all that by learning your areas and stuff like that, and then associating it with how the thermals would be. You can experiment with that postseason, just see what them thermals are acting like.
yeah.
It could be a little bit different because you don't have as much leaves on because the leaves will affect it to an extent. So,
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me just in learning spots that I started doing a couple years ago was just wind mapping areas when I'm scouting. Always carrying
mm,
milkweed with me and like look at the prevailing. And every time I go to a spot, I try to drop milkweed and I try to look at what my prevailing is so I get a better idea of on a north
mm,
wind it'll do this, on a south wind it'll do this. Because when I started doing that, man, I was really surprised by like how often I might have a prevailing north, but in that spot, every time I'm on a north, I get a south, like in that spot, where it actually blows the
uh,
opposite of what the prevailing's telling me.
uh,
You know,
yeah, all right. You can't hardly ever count on the weatherman on stuff like that. So,
yeah,
and another thing, like what down here, we only have specific gun hunts, on specific days, and I go more by timing and what I've wrote in the book, what days by what trail camera things or what I've seen over the years that I've wrote down, and I have to hunt when I'm off, so
mhm,
I'm going to be hunting regardless. I might have to adjust a little bit when I get there, but I'm not. That's one thing people ask me about moon phases and all that stuff is when I'm off, I could care less how the moon is, so I got
mhm,
to hunt. So you only got so many hunting days, so that stuff is never in my mind about how I'm going to hunt or anything. It's just I'm hunting. My wife's going with me, so she's only going to hunt a half a day, and then early season she go pick the evenings, and then during the rut she go hunt the mornings, and I'll go back and hunt the evenings and stuff. If it's some kind of funky front or something like that, we'll go in later, say hunt from 8 to 2 or something like that. We'll break it up, and we've had a lot of success doing that. So
mm,
you've got to hunt when you're off, or when you can hunt, or if not, you're only way going to kill them is hunting. So there's a lot of other variables that put deer on their feet besides moon and all that stuff. People, coyotes,
yep,
doe and heat or whatever. Is a bunch of other stuff that on. So the best odds you can put in your favor is hunting. Period. Is learning your land and how your deer use that land, and then being there to hunt. So
yeah. That's a good point, man. The number one strategy for killing mature deer is to hunt,
right,
right? It's just
yeah.
to be in the woods, right?
You can't. And another thing is you can't make them go where you want them to be. You got to be where they want to be.
Yeah,
That's another thing. There's a couple of things you got to keep in your mind. You can't make them like making it like you're going to do scrapes. Stuff like that. You don't do them away from a trail. You got to get it close to the trail or on the trail to make something. Mock scrape stuff like that because they're not going to come where you want them to most of the time. So you got to figure out how they travel and use that. You don't want to give them any kind of inkling or sign that you're doing something manipulating and knowing you're manipulating them, and then you're putting it in their hands. And so
yeah.
I don't want to do anything like that. So
So you mentioned that low setup that you maybe hunt it once or twice, and then the jig is kind of up at that point. Likely that something will know
yeah,
that
that's early. That's early
early
season. What I mean,
season.
yeah, yeah.
So how many times will you hunt a setup? Like how many consecutive days would you hunt a location? So say you have a spot that you really like, you've got the right wind for the next 3 days. would you hunt that location 3 days in a row, or do you have kind of like a number in your mind that you're like, man, I don't really hunt a spot any more than twice or whatever the case is?
From my years running trail cameras, using these creek crossing, these junctions, and these funnels and stuff, the places that I concentrate on, unless I'm a specific buck hunting, and that's not, I don't do that very often. My odds will be is where I got a chance at more than one buck. So over the years, I've learned in these certain funnel areas that where the bucks are traveling, going to different doe groups, where I've had more than 3 or 4 bucks that are over 120 or over 3.5 years old use the same area, and it might take them because we have a bigger range. Our deer travel a little bit farther because the dinner density is a little bit lower. That they'll make it take them 3 or 4 days. So if I got a place like that and everything's right, and I know there's more than one big buck could come through there going checking doe groups, I would hunt it for most of our longest gun hunts are 4 days. So I would hunt it. I would hunt it all 4 days. So
Mm,
and I have. So and I've killed before. I've killed more than one good buck off the same area within in a year. So
mm,
it's you gotta you gotta have the right spot. You can't just do it. If you're hunting a specific buck and you're in, so you're down in Fulton or whatever you're doing, the real close to the bed stuff, you've got a limited time to do that because they're there more than you are, and they'll figure you out quick. So
right.
you got to be able to adjust that. So that's a tough deal. I mean, people that do that, I'm proud for them. But that's one of the hardest thing to do is to do early season down here for me.
Hmm.
I have done it, but it's tougher. But what I've only got a limited amount of time of that because when Halloween hits down here, everything changes. So they're starting to do their pre-rut and stuff and making scrapes and stuff like that. So we alternate, or I alternate high hunt a little bit. So
Right.
I'm moving into that stage of it, more transition areas and stuff like that. So,
Right. Now, so, you might hunt the same spot, but would you change trees at least during different hunts, or would you hunt the same exact tree for
It,
4 hunts?
it just depends. I have, yeah.
Yeah.
If nothing, if I got to cover there and stuff like that, and the wind's right, there's no reason because I'm a big stickler about. I always go in and out the same way. I
Hmm.
try to go in where I'm not interfering with any kind of other trails. I'm not crossing any trails. I'm not walking through deer. I'm not walking through a food plot. I'm not walking through the middle of a cutover or anything like that. I'm trying to transition to a spot by coming a way that I'm not going to affect them. I'll travel like if I'm going to hunt a place where a thermal hub, whatever, I'm going to try to pop over a slight ridge and just be right down the neck, just right below that ridge where I can see 3 or 4 of them places coming together, above a creek crossing or above any kind of crossing. So I'm not, and if I come in with a headlamp, I'm walking the headlamp till I get to a certain point, then I'm going switching to a little pin light where I shine on the ground. And some of the places I'll have leaves raked out already to where I'm just being as quiet as I can.
Hmm.
You still want a little noise, and I'm not really worried about that. But I'm trying to make it where they're not knowing I'm hunting them, so I'm going in and out same ways. I feel like if you're going in different, that depends on what kind of bedding stuff you got. Where they move around bedding in different places, you might can transition from a different way. But most of the places I'm hunting like that, I'm not really doing that. I'm hunting transition areas and travel corridors. So the more the funnel, some kind of funnel is making them go through that spot. When I get to there, I've not interfered with anything before I get to it. So
Hmm.
because and a lot of them funnel areas, I've got to say a bluff gap or a funnel or blowdowns or something like that make them, where I've got a better chance or a closer, especially bow hunting, a closer chance at a shot. So it's a more of a pinch. It's some kind of a natural barrier, or like you were talking earlier, a spot within a spot within a spot. The more things you got to change or in an area, and it might be a 100 yard change. The creek cross might be 100 yards, but they come by a bluff gap at 75 yards down there, and then they come up to a pine edge. It's 50 yards
Hmm.
up or half a mile, whatever. It can stretch out for a pretty good distance, but it's more than one thing. It makes them travel a certain way when they're doing that. So a lot of that is you got to take boots on the ground, and some of it's map stuff, but it's more of the bigger picture stuff. So
Hmm. So we've we've talked about we've mentioned thermal hubs a couple different times during our
mhm.
chat here. Is there something that, because I've talked to a couple different people, about this, and they look for certain things, right? Certain terrain features. And one guy comes to mind is Jake Bush. Like he will look for like terrain. He's in Ohio. and he
Mhm.
will look for, topography that kind of almost makes like a C shape that's, I forget which direction it's faced, but the open end of the C will always face a certain direction. Like he looks for those on the map, and like almost without fail, when he finds that certain kind of topography feature, there will be a thermal hub there, and he will find a hammerbuck bedded not too far from there. Is there anything that you look for when you're looking at maps that you're looking for that kind of show that tell you like, hey, thermal hub here? And aside from like, there's multiple drainages dumping into a certain spot, is there any type of like topographical kind of feature or outline that you're looking for that are things that really kind of trip your trigger, or you're like, oh, there's going to be a thermal hub there and that's going to be a doozy?
I've that open sea thing, that's kind of unique. I don't know if I've actually heard that yet, but that's a unique thing to think about. I'm still like this thermal hub. I've never heard it called that until the last couple of years. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always looked at it, the more things that come together, the better. So you
Mm-hmm.
start with that, and I always look at like in the area we start out with, the more mountainous area, the upper third or the upper third of a third.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there's the more stuff to look for, the hemlocks and the uh mountain laurels and different things like that they use to bed in. You're looking for that, and then going out from there as far as how they travel to do that. But as far as scent checking and stuff like that, I'm just now listening to everybody talk about that stuff, how they use that, but I've never really concentrated on that much. I'm looking for more than one thing coming together than starting out looking for tracks and
Mm-hmm.
dope bedding and stuff like that during the postseason to try to put all that together, and then how they're going to travel to get to there. So,
Right. Yeah,
my
and that's a lot of the way I follow the same kind of school of thought as you. It's more just like how many kind of intersection points do I have? That, and to be truthful, it's the area that I hunt, in eastern PA, it's a lot of flat ground, at least locally. And so, there's not going to be anything, at least for me, it's going to jump out on a map that's going to say, hey, there's a big thermal hub here. It's usually, most of the, big kind of thermal hubs or primary scrapes that I've come across was just, me putting a lot of boots on the ground and checking areas and transition areas where you're having habitat come together, and, and creating a hard edge of some sort and finding it in those areas. That's a lot of what, how I've personally found them. Just for lack of topography, but just figured
Right,
out I would
and
ask.
also sound like that guy's like he's hunting specific buck beds,
Oh, he
and
is. Yeah,
like and so we're doing that here. If I'm looking for buck beds, when I look at say onyx now is in cow topo and maybe Huntston, I'm not sure, but onyx and cow topo is what I use. Now, if you're looking at places where the lines or the darker color lines, the steeper, nastier stuff, and a buck, mature ones especially love the bed close to bluff stuff where they got a hard back wall where there's no way anything get from behind them. Then they've got open sight in front of them, and then there's some kind of nasty stuff that are kind of in as far as laurels or blowdown and stuff like that. But their background is generally, if you got areas like that, is up against close to a bluff. My wife found a big old bed this year that he was laying up against a big old pine tree that 10 foot behind it was 70 foot up bluff. So
Mhm.
and he could see a big valley that went down. It probably dropped say 175 feet or more in elevation change down to or drainage where if anything come from anywhere he could get out where
Mhm.
nobody even know it was there. So finding that stuff. I like finding all that postseason, but specific bed buck hunting, I don't do that much. So
Yeah, and he does. That's kind of his thing. It's you could
uh,
almost. He's just one of those guys where it's like you can almost set your watch to it opening day. Like, don't be surprised whenever he's got
uh,
a hammer on the ground. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
just kind of how that's his game, and he's really good at it.
it's
Um,
it down here. We don't have we got some big bucks as far as if I screw up like that big buck I killed last year, if I knew about where he was bedding at. But if I went in there and screwed him up, that was it. I was done. That was my only big buck.
mhm.
My chance of being the state record holder was gone. So I had to play it by from what camera stuff told me about what days he was daylighting, and would just try to intercept him, and it worked out because cameras have taught me that over the years. Is there's here the once they start squirrel hunting and stuff like that, bucks figure that out, and they're flipping a light switch, and they're going to travel different. They're going to adjust how they're moving in daylight if they move any in daylight. So it makes it hard. So I have to be very careful if I've got big bucks on camera about how I do it because I don't want to blow it. So most of the time in my real good areas, I'm not targeting early season. I'm targeting something outside of them areas
Hmm.
that I find, you know. So
Right.
you have to be real careful because, like I say, that we don't have, you know, I can't find 7 or 8 or 10 or
Hmm.
whatever monster bucks to hunt. And if I blow one, I'm not worried about it. I can't do that. And I've only got limited days to hunt, so it's harder for me to do that. So,
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I'm often in the same boat where it's, I'm usually looking for, a handful of decent bucks, you know what I mean?
right.
And every now and then I'll get, at least locally, I'll get one that is a looker. That was kind of the case last year. That buck hasn't showed back up, so I don't know if he's dead or what the deal is.
Uh,
But I
yeah,
probably
we're looking for a 3.5-year-old and older. You know, we're not specifically targeting. You know, I'm not targeting 7-year-olds or whatever some people are shooting for nowadays,
yeah.
or a 180 and above or whatever. I'm not. I've not got to that point yet, and I hope I don't really get to that point because I enjoy the other aspect of
I
hunting it.
I always say I'll never kill a great buck because if I see a good one, I'm going to shoot it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's kind of my
yeah.
game. But man, I want to ask you. You've mentioned your wife a couple times. In terms of just like how she'll hunt with you and does
Mhm.
scouting with you and stuff like that. And I know you have a section in the book where you talk about realizing that she was your best hunting partner or something to that effect.
Right.
How can you kind of I just explain that relationship of hunting with your wife and how important that is and things of that nature? Because I think like for me, for example, my wife doesn't hunt, and a lot of guys are
Right.
probably in a similar boat, right? And so I can only imagine. But how key is she to how you hunt and the success that you guys have together?
But if I didn't have her, I wouldn't be as successful as I am now because, like, she was with me that the day I killed the monster, and she's been there with me on several of them. It's just the hard part about having, like, I've had several men hunting buddies over the year, but the way I work and the way, it's unique to where everybody else works. So finding somebody, because it's a process of trying to figure out how you want to hunt where it works for you, and some people don't like hunting the way I do, and they're because they want to see more deer, like we was talking about earlier.
Hmm.
If they're not seeing anything, they get too bored with it quick. Where it don't bother me not to see a deer. I'm waiting on the 3 seconds that it takes to kill a big one. So
Right.
I'm waiting for that specific time. I don't want to sit there and watch 8 hours worth of does and stuff running around. So, but she trusts me. She's got a detailed eye about stuff like that, and she enjoys seeing anything. She'll take pictures of whatever, and she's had her chance at monster bucks. She has not got you got because in life when you're hunting and stuff like that, you start out you go through stages. So you got to work yourself through some things, and she got tore up or didn't trust what her equipment or her ability to shoot her equipment because she had a 190 something one time that come by her, for 30 minutes messing around with does, breeding does and making scrapes and stuff like that. And she had a crossbow that she just had got, just wasn't real comfortable with it yet, and just was passed up, decent shots, waiting on the perfect shot. And I tried to teach her, you get real familiar with equipment, and the first shot you get, to take it. Don't wait for the perfect because you might not ever get it. So you just got to trust yourself and your equipment, and then buckle down to make the shot. So and but she enjoys it. She loves it. She loves getting out in the woods and just her camping part that we do. And she grew up not hunting. Her dad was like a bird hunter. He loved quail hunting stuff like that. She didn't know anything about deer hunting until we got together. And so nope. So now that our son is out of the house stuff like that, we have more time to do it. And she's locking down pretty good. So I expect her to kill a whopper here one of these days. Right now she's the only one in the family that has killed a buck with she killed a buck with a regular bow, crossbow, a muzzle loader, and a rifle. So and that's ahead of me. I've not killed one with a crossbow. So she's very versatile now. So she's a
Right.
she's a perfectionist. So look out. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, it's key to have a good hunting buddy, man. That's and
mhm,
it's even better whenever it's when it's your significant other.
right,
Because
yeah,
I hunt with my buddy Chad a lot. We travel together a good bit, and I got a lot of good friends, and but he and I work well together. Like we like to
Mm.
hunt the same way. We embrace the hard parts of the hunt. We actually just sometimes I think it makes us enjoy the hunt even more when they're
Right.
hard, you know. And when you find that person that you can spend that like time with like that, and you'd like to do things the same way, it's like you just hold on to that person, whether
Right.
it's your wife or whether it's just a good buddy, because
Right.
they don't good hunting buddies just don't drop into your lap every day necessarily.
Right,
So
and they're all, like, unique, like, she's got different ways she looks at things versus I do, and she can hear better, but she looks at things, completely same, completely different, and that's
mm,
the unique perspective, but she does not want to, like, hunt together, and she don't really hardly like doing that. She
mhm.
likes being by herself, and
Yeah,
she's got where places where I can just let her go to a tree by herself and stuff like that. And so we've been out to Wyoming several times, and she loves, after we get through hunting, whatever, just going out and looking for sheds or just checking the terrain out in the different areas out where a lot of people don't like doing that. She'll walk for hours, just looking at stuff because it's a unique perspective for her. And she's not done a whole lot of traveling like that until we got married 30 years ago now. So 31 years now. So
nice.
and but it's just when late now in our life we've been able to do a little bit more of that stuff. But she really enjoys it. She's bear hunting and been on maybe with the moose hunt stuff like that. So she's actually got the biggest bear in the house. She killed a 404 pounder with a crossbow in New Brunswick. So it's
That's awesome.
yeah. So she's done that with that crossbow. And now since she killed that with a crossbow, any buck that's steps in front of her is in trouble because she's got confidence
She's
now
got
with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So,
She's feeling it now.
yeah, yeah. So look out. So
That's right, man. So I want to talk to you real quick about we talked about trail cameras a couple times here, and so I just want to get a sense of how specifically you're using them, because it sounds to me like the one you were talking about. When you have a good buck on camera, you'll know an area, where there's a good buck, and maybe when he's going to use that area. I mean, are you targeting specific dates, kind of based off a trail camera like
right.
intel, or how are you kind of using those?
I use that like I go out, do my postseason count looking for different funnel areas and stuff like that, places that I would actually hunt. I look at it how if I can't hunt there, I don't want to put a camera there. So
Mhm.
I'll find a unique funnel or whatever, and I'll put a camera there, and then I won't check it during the season until after the season. And I'll look and see what comes through, and I always look at them dates because the best picture of a deer to have or a buck to have is a hard horn picture. You
Mhm.
know, if you get a mature buck with a hard horn, I mean, you're in the game because he's there for a reason.
Right.
So, velvet pictures they can move a little bit, but over the last couple of years, I've kind of learned. I've talked to another guy in Iowa about a deer when a big buck gets real mature. If he finds him a place, and I've noticed on camera that he likes, he'll stay there, velvet and hard horn. And I've had a couple of bucks over the last 2 or 3 years that's like that. So,
Hmm.
but a hard horn picture of a mature buck, you're in the game. So I'm looking for that, and I'm looking for the dates, and if it's more than one buck, coming through, that's gold because your odds are better. So I'm looking for them spots. But so I run a bunch of I've say Browning. I think I like Strike Force Browns. They're not real pricey, and if somebody steals them, I deal with it too bad. A lot of people are going with the cheaper cameras, but I don't. I like them a little bit better than, let's say, the Tasco because I'm not.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people they go, some of them are, some of them good, and some of them ain't. But I don't want to. I want a decent camera because that intel is gold. So
Yeah.
I've got a few sale cams. I don't know if I'm in on that game or not yet. So that's. I don't know if they outlawed them, it wouldn't bother me a bit. So
Right.
it you think you're expecting something with them, and I'm not really getting that what everybody talks about them anyway. So, but
Yes. The way I use my cell cameras is like you were talking about earlier, limited time to hunt and stuff like that,
mm,
right?
uh,
And so what it saves me on is I put those into places where I don't want to intrude. Like I don't even want to go in and check the camera,
mm-hmm,
and it'll be a spot like, say, for example, like a primary scrape area or like a thermal hub area where I
right,
know there's a hammer scrape, and I know 3 days in the middle of October before actual pre-rut, like I know that there's a hot doe in this area that comes in early, and I just need
mm,
to wait to get like the intel that like a couple does and a couple bucks hit that scrape. All of a sudden, I know, all right, the 3 day window has just opened. I got 3 days now to make it
right,
happen. I use it for that, and then I don't ever go in. Like it stays there all year round, watches
mm,
that scrape, like, and that's it. And I let it tell me when the party's about to kick off, and then I'll plan my hunts around those couple dates. That's
mm,
essentially how I use it. That way, anything that's hard to reach or takes me a long time to hike or is really intrusive that the only time I want to hike into that spot is when I plan to hunt it. Those are the spots that I use them for essentially.
I, the ones I got, I got them on like a burst, take power picture or whatever, and they'll send me. They're supposed to send me one out of them, but I checked one. The battery was going low, and when I went through the car looking at, there was some pictures of deer that it didn't send me a picture of, and I'm trying to figure out why. So that's kind of. I'm not all in on that part of it. If there's a reason why the signal's not good enough and it's not sending, one of them set all the time or what. So
right.
It's still a learning process for me. We don't have real good signal areas on some of them places where I actually would want one to be at, for that, because I'm exactly like you. I don't want to mess with them. It's very rare of me to check one during the season unless I'm hunting right there close to it. So I don't, because like I say, I don't want the deer knowing I'm hunting if I can. So I don't mess with them. I like the least intrusion. So
Now, are there any? Do you have any favorite dates that you like? So based on all the trail camera data that you've had and all the years that you've been hunting, do you have a handful of dates that you really kind of fancy?
If I had to pick one day, it would be December 2nd.
Really?
That's because it was just because I've killed a 158 on December 2nd, another 10-point, and maybe another buck, and I've heard more grunting or chasing or something like that on that specific date by my journal. And there's other dates, that's if I had to pick a 2-week time frame, whatever it's going to be from say November 20 something to December 5th or something like that. This prime area, then the different public land that we hunted will be different time frames, but this main place where we have the best chance of killing a big old buck is. If I had to pick a day, it would be December 2nd. But but that's just me.
Now, in that general area, when does your rut come in? Is that one of those areas of Alabama that has a little later rut?
No, it's actually the earlier rut. It's like November 13th. But
okay,
I was talking to somebody about that before. Is that during that time frame, most of the time it's kind of like a lull. If you're not exactly where the older does are at, the first ones that come in heat, everything kind of gets quiet. You don't see that much. Movement as far as buck movement and stuff. But later on, like when the 2-year-old does, whatever it is, starts coming in the heat, they start traveling more, buck starts moving more. So it's always a little bit later on. It's kind of a lull at the beginning of the rut, but November 13th is the initial conception dates on this one area. So,
nice.
So.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I've been bending your ear here for a little over an hour. I want to be sensitive to your time, so I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Before I let you go, though, I want you to let people know where they can find the book, where they can buy it, and where they can check out things you have going on.
Right now, it's on Amazon, and look up Michel Perry, and it's the title of the book is Deer Hunting: Secrets to Taking Mature Bucks on Public Land. So. Amazon, you can look me up on Facebook or Instagram and send me a message. And if you wanted me to send one a certain way specific, I can try to do that for you. And then we've got a little YouTube channel, That's Wild Hunting. We're doing some stuff, some of my scouting tactics and some other things. So you can look it up on that. But if you want personal message me, I can. I talk to everybody I can, and love talking to people, especially from different parts of the country, because. I listen to podcasts from all over the place, Troy Pottinger, and just everybody's got unique, tactics that I like listening to, because I instill some of that in some of the ways that I hunt. And it's, everybody's got to find their own little niche to hunt. So I highly advise and appreciate all this information that y'all got out there, and just, listen to the podcast, find books. There's not a, you don't hear much about books nowadays, but, I read a few books every now and then. So.
Yeah.
So, but try to help me out and buy a book, because it helps promote the public land and stuff like that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, everyone should go out and check it out. Yeah, hop on Amazon. Michel Perry, Secrets to Taking Mature Bucks on Public Land, buddy. I appreciate you coming on, talking about the book. I appreciate you coming on, just chatting with me, and I always appreciate when we share some text messages or Facebook messages. You are one of the good ones, sir, and I just appreciate your spending some time with you.
Well, I appreciate you, Clint, and I appreciate everything you do, buddy.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Spartan Forge, Exodus, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.